Chag Sameach, everybody. I'd like to share with you some exciting news about the Zohar project. But first, I'd like to remind all of us how the Zohar project began. The Zohar project began thousands of years ago. Most of us know that during the times that the Romans ruled Israel, they did not allow the study, dissemination of this wisdom. And Rav Shimon Bar Yochai was adamant about the need to continue to teach, to disseminate this light, this wisdom, because he knew, what the Kabbalists have known for thousands of years, that it is only with the dissemination of the light, of the wisdom of Kabbalah, specifically the light that is within the Zohar, that a true change can come to our world, that the pain, suffering, and death that exists in our world can end. So Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, although he knew that his life could be at stake for continuing to teach, for continuing to disseminate this light and this wisdom, does so. The Romans decide they are going to kill him, kill Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, as they killed his teacher, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai runs away into a cave, and for 12 years he studies there with his son Rabbi Elazar, and all the great souls throughout history, Moses, Elijah the prophet, they all come and take part in the revelation of what we know as the Zohar. Within the Zohar, the Kabbalists teach, was enclosed all the light that we individually and that the world collectively needs to bring an end to pain, suffering, and death. And from that moment on, when it was revealed by Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, it was still, we know, concealed. It was only about 1,000 years ago in Spain when the Kabbalists finally reawakened this light, found anew the light of the Zohar, and from that moment on it became clear that the only way to truly change our world, the only way for the individual to change completely, is by availing oneself and making available to the world the great light that is within the Zohar. Whenever we speak of the Zohar, whenever we speak of the Zohar project, we have to first have clarity about what it is. It is not a set of books. It is not a book. It is not even wisdom. It is supernal light. It is the greatest light ever revealed in our world. And it is only as this light becomes prevailing in our world, as this light becomes disseminated completely in our world, that the true change that we are all working for, that we all desire, can take place. And the Kabbalists have taught this for thousands of years. And Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, Rav Isaac Luria, the Baal Shem Tov, Rav Ashlag, Rav Brandwein, they all taught that it is of utmost importance that the light of the Zohar be found in every single home, available to every single person. But it was only when the Rav, not that many years ago, decided to create the Zohar project that it became a real possibility. That millions and billions of people all over the world will have access to the great light of the Zohar. And that is the seed. That is where this Zohar project began. And over the past number of years, there have been great strides made. Hundreds of thousands of Zohars disseminated, millions of people having access to this light, to this wisdom. But now we want to go even further. Because as it is clear, the Zohar says in the words, Bahai Sifra Yifkun Min Galuta. Only with the dissemination of the light of the Zohar will pain, suffering, and death, or as the Kabbalists call it, the Gemara Tikkun, the end of the correction, occur. And in order to reawaken, to re-inspire all of us to this important work, I'd like to remind all of us that really the Zohar project has 4 main parts, 4 legs of this great work. The first part is education. Because as the Kabbalists teach, consciousness is everything. 2 people can have the Zohar. If one of them has a greater appreciation, knowledge, understanding of its light, of its power, he will receive more light from it. The other person who has the Zohar will receive some light from it. But if they do not have an appreciation, have an understanding of the great light that exists within it, the amount of light that they will receive will be less. And therefore the first pillar of this work is education. And this is true for every single one of us who already knows about the Zohar, who maybe already uses the Zohar, but it is certainly important for the rest of the world. So as we think of the Zohar project, we think about it first as how can we awaken, educate, inspire, teach enough people, millions, billions of people all over the world concerning the great light that is found inside the Zohar. One of the important steps that we are taking, we are creating a new site called zohar.com, through which we know that we will be able to reach millions of people and educate them and give them the beginning access to this great light. The second pillar of the Zohar project is dissemination. As the Kabbalists have said for thousands of years, as the Rav said at the inception of this project, get a Zohar to every single person, to every single place in this world. And that is what we have been doing, and now we are pushing to do it in a much greater way. The Rav always said, and those of you who had the merit to be around the Rav, whenever there was a place that has either difficulty or darkness, send the Zohars there. And the Rav, for years upon years, would send thousands of Zohars to places that either had a potential for darkness or were beginning to manifest. And the miracles happened one after the other. So the dissemination of the Zohar is very important, both to places and, of course, to people. As we disseminate the Zohar, we make sure to find, whether it's world leaders or people who are in important positions, to have the light and support of the Zohar. We give them the Zohar to support them, and through them to support our world. But the other aspect of dissemination, which was certainly where the Zohar project began, and even before the Zohar project, to get it to people. Every single one of us knows our family, our friends, those around us. One of the greatest gifts, if not the greatest gift that you can give them, is the Zohar. But it's important as we think about dissemination to realize that, as we said earlier, education is important, because the more an individual appreciates and knows about the Zohar, the more light he will receive from it. It is also true that the more an individual pays for the Zohar, the more he will receive the light from it. One of the most basic teachings of Kabbalah is bread of shame. You can give your friend a Zohar, and he'll get some light from it. But if he actually does something to earn it, if he pays for it, if he donates towards the Zohar project to receive it, he receives more light from it. So it's important as we think of disseminating, and whether we're disseminating just amongst our friends, those around us, or we're disseminating further into the world, we have to be clear that for the individual receiving the Zohar to be able to access and draw into their lives the protection, the light, the blessings that the Zohar has, they have to have a deeper understanding of its light, and they have to have done something to earn its light. And as we talk about dissemination, again, we are continuing to send the Zohar to the dangerous, potentially difficult places in our world. But it's also important that each one of us, in whatever situation we are, make it a point every week, find one more person to whom you can give the great gift of the light of the Zohar. But try to make sure that it is without bread of shame. And that's the second pillar of the Zohar project, dissemination. The third pillar, which is so important, of course, but it's important to remind ourselves of what we know: connection, study. If a person truly understands the great light that is within the Zohar, we know that it is not enough simply to have it sitting on our bookcase. We want to access, reveal more of that light. So if you understand what the Zohar is, then you certainly make it a priority daily. And I have to say that it sometimes surprises me as I speak to students, and especially students who have been around for some time, and I ask them, how much Zohar do you read, study, scan daily? And sometimes they tell me that they don't. And it's crazy is the only word that comes to mind. If you know anything about the Zohar, if you know anything about Kabbalah, you know that really it is almost impossible for the individual to truly receive the light and blessings in any given day without connecting, studying, scanning the Zohar. And therefore, the third very important pillar of the Zohar project is study, connection. One of the exciting parts of the project is we are beginning a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week scanning, so that there will not be a second in our world when Zohar is not being scanned, when Zohar is not being studied. But it's important, again, for all of us, regardless of how much time we have in our day, how involved we are in the Zohar project, even for ourselves individually, to remind ourselves, if I want to receive the endless light and blessings and protection that is within the Zohar. It's not enough to have it on me. It's not enough to have it sitting in my home or in my car. Connect to it, study it, and inspire others, awaken others to make their connections as well. And the fourth pillar of the Zohar project is support. Supporting the Zohar project, volunteering, giving time, giving money. Of course, as we disseminate the Zohars, we have to print the Zohars. More and more Zohars are printed, more and more Zohars are shipped, more and more Zohars are disseminated. There are very few ways of giving and support that can bring greater blessings into an individual's lives, into our lives, than supporting the work of the dissemination of the Zohar. And I'd like to share two stories, one from Rav Ashlag. Many of you know that Rav Ashlag was very, very poor. He would literally not even have money to buy paper upon which to write his translation and commentary on the Zohar. He would use scraps of papers that he found, and he would use both sides. And he would raise money. There's a very sad commentary. Rav Ashlag writes that at a certain point, he realized that he is not going to have enough money to publish all of his writings, all of his revelations that he wanted to write on the Zohar. So he said, from now on, I will limit my revelations. And as you'll find, therefore, in the first few volumes of the Zohar, Rav Ashlag's commentary is much longer, and it gets shorter and shorter in the later portions. He just didn't have the support to reveal that great light, to reveal those great secrets. And one can only imagine how much easier our world would be, how much easier our lives would be if that light would have been able to be revealed. And there's a story that once Rav Ashlag met a supporter at that time of the printing of the Zohar. And the man turns to Rav Ashlag and he says to him, I want a blessing. Rav Ashlag turns to the student, to the person, he says, I promise you that if you support the printing of the Zohar, I will give to you from my share in the supernal world. Rav Ashlag says, I will give you my share of supernal blessings. Because Rav Ashlag knew that there are very few things that one can do in this world because of the effect that it could have on this world, that can bring as much light and blessings both in this physical world and the supernal worlds, in the spiritual worlds, than the assistance and the support and the dissemination of the Zohar. The other story is, as many of you know, when my father, the Rav, lived in the United States, his teacher, Rav Brandwein, lived in Israel. And the Rav would study with his teacher in many ways, and one of them was through the letters. And there's one letter that Rav Brandwein writes to my father, to the Rav, and he says to the Rav, he says, when it comes to speaking to people about what they can receive, blessings and light that they can receive from assisting in the printing, in the dissemination of the Zohar, in our terms, in the Zohar project, Rav Brandwein says an amazing, amazing thing. And Rav Brandwein was very careful with his words. He says to my father, to the Rav, you can tell the individual who you are asking to support the dissemination, the printing of the Zohar, any blessing that they desire, you can promise them. Any blessing they desire, you can give them, because there's nothing greater that can be done to bring light into this world than the printing, the studying, the dissemination of the light of the Zohar. And therefore, the fourth pillar of the Zohar project is support, either by volunteering or financial support, to enable the Zohar project not only to grow, but to achieve its ultimate purpose. And I'd like to share with you a small group of students are traveling Lag BaOmer from New York to New Orleans. Many of us, of course, know what has happened in New Orleans over the past few years. And they took upon themselves, these volunteers from the Zohar Project in New York, to travel there, to educate people about the light in the Zohar, to disseminate the Zohar, to assist in both physical assistance to those who have been affected by the hurricane, and also to fundraise for the Zohar Project. They, and again, I know there are literally hundreds of, if not thousands of volunteers all over the world who are doing this, but this one story of a group of students from New York personally inspired me, and I hope it inspires you. Inspires you in whatever way you can. In all of these four ways. either by educating yourself or others, by connecting yourself or others, by disseminating amongst your close group or supporting the Zohar Project, and as we said, supporting the Zohar Project, and as what we said, the ultimate goal. Because it really is only one purpose for the Zohar Project. As the Kabbalists teach, Behai Sifra Yifkon Min Galuta, it is through the dissemination, a critical mass. Now, we don't know if it's the next 100 or the next 1,000 or the next 100,000 or the next million. But there will be a point of critical mass of this light revealed and disseminated in this world. And when that happens, it is the Gemara Tikkun. It is the end of the correction. It is the time when pain, suffering, and death is removed from our world. I hope for myself, I hope for all of us, that especially on this most powerful of evenings, when this light is truly awakened and revealed so completely in our world, that we reawaken our appreciation for its light, and we reawaken our commitment to do everything we can for ourselves, for those around us, for our world, to get this light completely revealed. Chag Sameach.